The morning begins in the stillness of Claire's kitchen. Sunlight slipping through the curtains, the soft clatter of dishes, the hum of ordinary life masking years of unspoken pain. Claire, in her late 30s, has grown used to silence, to the rhythm of solitude that follows heartbreak. Her hands move automatically through the soapy water, her mind distant when the quiet is broken by footsteps. Evan, her 17-year-old stepson, lingers at the doorway, shoulders tense, eyes uncertain. There's hesitation in his voice as he finally speaks. One question that slices through the calm. Was it true? What Dad did to you? The words stop her cold. Time collapses. For a moment, she's back in the past, the night she found out about Mark's affair. The sting of betrayal floods her all over again. The messages on his phone, the scent of another woman's perfume, and the unbearable realization that it was Tessa, her late wife's best friend, the woman she trusted, who had comforted her when grief had nearly broken her. Claire had thought she'd hidden it all from Evan, shielding him from adult cruelties. But standing there now, she realizes he knows. The secret she buried so deeply has finally surfaced. As Claire struggles for words, the air feels heavy with things unsaid. She senses the boy's pain, the confusion in his gaze. Not anger, but something worse, disappointment and fear. Her throat tightens as she whispers, "Why are you asking now?" The question trembles between them like a fragile thread. Evan's answer lands softly, but it detonates inside her. Because I think he's doing it again. In that instant, the past and present collide. Betrayal reborn, trust shattered once more. The story begins not with shouting, but with a quiet devastation that promises everything is about to unravel again. 2 years earlier, life had seemed full of second chances for Claire. After years of loneliness, she believed she'd finally found a home again, a purpose beyond the classroom. As a high school teacher, she was patient and empathetic, qualities that carried into her marriage with Mark, a widower still wrapped in quiet grief. She wanted to be gentle with his son, Evan, never overstepping, never trying to replace his mother. But Evan's polite distance, his cool silences, and occasional flashes of resentment reminded her daily that love in a blended family was something that had to be earned, not assumed. Mark, in those early months, had been everything she thought she needed. Steady, charming, and full of easy affection. He had the kind of confidence that made others feel safe, the practiced warmth of a man who knew how to be admired. But slowly cracks began to show. His laughter grew rarer, his phone always just out of reach. Late-night business calls stretched into hours. When she asked, he smiled and brushed it off. Claire told herself not to doubt him, but the pit in her stomach deepened each time he turned away, each time she caught a flicker of guilt in his eyes. And then there was Tessa. She was woven into their lives before Claire ever arrived, a family friend, always kind, always present. She'd helped Evan with college essays, brought over casseroles, and stayed long after dinner under the guise of keeping Mark company. To outsiders, she seemed harmless, devoted even. But to Claire, her laughter lingered too long. Her gaze lingered too warmly on Mark. Every instinct in Claire whispered that something was wrong. But when she voiced it, Mark's words cut her down. She's family. That dismissal silenced her, leaving her trapped between doubt and denial, unaware she was standing on the edge of heartbreak. It began on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day that lulls you into thinking life is stable. Claire was grading papers when her phone buzzed with a notification from Mark. It was a video message, brief and unexpected. Curious, she opened it, and the world tilted. Mark's face filled the screen, his voice low and tender, whispering words meant for someone else. "I can't keep sneaking around like this, but I can't stop either." For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. The kitchen blurred. Every sound vanished except his voice, confessing the truth she'd feared but never dared to believe. In the days that followed, Claire lived inside a quiet hell. She didn't confront him right away. She needed to see who he became when he didn't know she knew. She watched the lies multiply, the sudden late meetings, the phone turned face down, the way he smiled too brightly when she asked simple questions. When she tried to reach him, he accused her of paranoia. "You're imagining things, Claire," he'd snap, his tone cold, practiced. Evan felt the tension, his loyalty instinctive. He pulled away from her, assuming she was the cause of his father's bitterness. When the truth became unbearable, Claire finally shattered. The confrontation was volcanic, years of trust collapsing in minutes. Her voice broke as she demanded answers, and Mark, cornered, denied everything until his anger flared. "You'll ruin everything," he shouted. "You never really understood me." That final cruelty silenced her. With trembling hands, she packed a single bag, clothes, keys, her dignity barely intact. As she turned toward the door, Evan stood in the hallway, his expression cold, wounded, loyal only to his father. He didn't speak, but his silence condemned her. That look, that choice, destroyed her more completely than Mark's betrayal ever could. Months passed, but the ache didn't fade. It simply learned to live beside her. Claire's new apartment was small, quiet, and too neat, a place where nothing moved unless she did. She taught her classes, smiled at her students, and told her therapist she was fine. But at night, the walls pressed in, heavy with what she'd lost. Sometimes she'd scroll through old photos of Evan, his awkward smile, the way he once called her Claire with shy warmth, and wonder if he hated her now. She didn't blame him. After all, she'd walked away. But every day, guilt whispered that she'd also left him behind. The world outside seemed to have moved on without her. Rumors reached her like small knives. Mark and Tessa were together now, openly, comfortably, as if their deceit had been a love story all along. Her co-workers urged her to start dating again, to heal, but they didn't understand that betrayal wasn't something you simply outgrew. It lived in her body like a shadow. Every vibration of her phone, every unexpected message made her flinch. Still, beneath the pain, there was one fragile thread of hope. That someday Evan would learn the truth, and maybe, just maybe, forgive her. Then one quiet evening, that hope turned to dread. Her inbox pinged with an email from Evan, or so she thought. But when she opened it, she realized it was an accidental forward. A message from Mark to Tessa. Subject line: "We can't let him know." Her pulse thundered as she read and reread those words, her mind spinning with possibilities. What were they hiding from Evan? Why the secrecy? Fear overrode hesitation. Within minutes, she grabbed her keys, heart pounding, and drove back toward the town she'd fled. Toward the house where everything had fallen apart, knowing she was about to tear open wounds that had never fully healed. The night Claire returned felt heavy with history. The air inside that house carried every argument, every lie. She hadn't planned the confrontation, but once she saw Evan's car parked outside, she knew it was time. Inside, Mark was all charm and false calm, acting surprised to see her. But before she could speak, Evan burst in, his face pale, his phone clutched in his hand. "I found them," he said, voice trembling. "The messages." Claire froze as he read aloud. Texts between Mark and a young woman from his company, proof of yet another affair. The room fell silent, the truth undeniable. Mark's mask began to crack. He reached for excuses, stress, loneliness, misunderstanding, but Evan wouldn't hear it. Years of confusion and loyalty shattered in an instant. "You lied about everything," Evan shouted, his voice breaking. "About Mom, about Tessa, about her." The fury in his eyes wasn't just for the new betrayal, but for every deception that came before it. Then, turning to Claire, his voice softened with guilt. "You were the only one who told the truth." The words struck her harder than any accusation. A fragile redemption years too late, but enough to make her tears fall freely. Mark, cornered, erupted. He grabbed a glass and hurled it against the wall, shards scattering like punctuation to his downfall. "You all betrayed me," he roared, the irony lost on him. Neighbors heard the chaos and called the police. When the officers arrived, the scene was raw and broken. Mark raging, Claire silent, Evan trembling. She refused to press charges. The damage was already done. The next day, word spread. His company suspended him, his reputation crumbled, and the life he'd built on lies collapsed entirely. For Claire and Evan, it wasn't triumph. It was release. Years of silence had finally ended in one devastating truth. Weeks later, the air between them was no longer filled with accusation, but quiet understanding. Claire and Evan met in a small cafe tucked away from the main street, the kind of place where life felt gentler. He looked older somehow. Not in years, but in the heaviness of someone who had seen too much too soon. He apologized without pretense, voice low and trembling, admitting he'd believed the wrong person for too long. He told her he was leaving home, starting college early, determined to live with the honesty his father never could. For the first time, Claire saw the man he was becoming. Her forgiveness came softly, like the end of a long storm. She didn't offer it because he asked for it. She offered it because she was finally ready to stop carrying the past like a burden. "You don't owe me anything," she told him, her eyes kind. "Just be better than we were." Evan nodded, tears he didn't bother to hide tracing his cheeks. The pain between them didn't vanish, but it shifted. No longer a wound, but a scar, a quiet reminder of survival. They parted not as stepmother and stepson divided by betrayal, but as two people choosing truth over silence. When Claire returned to her classroom, the world felt steadier. The chalk dust, the hum of students' laughter, the small rituals of her day, all of it felt new again. She was no longer a woman defined by loss, but by resilience. One morning, she found an envelope in her mailbox, Mark's handwriting. She didn't open it. The closure she needed didn't live in his words anymore. Instead, she placed the letter in a drawer and smiled, knowing she didn't need an ending to move forward. For the first time in years, Claire wasn't surviving. She was living, free and unafraid. The kitchen looked the same as it always had, neat, sunlit, humming with quiet domestic rhythm. But the air inside it had changed. Evan stood where he once stood months ago, his question echoing again in the stillness. Was it true? What Dad did to you? Only this time Claire didn't freeze. She didn't flinch or hide behind silence. Instead, she drew in a slow breath, her eyes steady, voice gentle but unshaken. "Yes," she said, a small knowing smile touching her lips. "It's true, but that's not the end of the story." The words didn't tremble anymore. They felt like release. Evan lowered his gaze, shame and regret flickering across his face. So much had changed. He knew now what truth cost, what lies could destroy. Before he could speak, Claire added softly, "What matters is what you choose to do next." The sentence lingered, not as a lesson, but as an offering. A bridge between who they had been and who they were becoming. Evan nodded, the weight of understanding visible in the slump of his shoulders, in the faint, grateful smile that crossed his face. The distance between them, once filled with pain, now held quiet forgiveness. The camera lingered on the ordinary, sunlight spilling over the counter, the faint sound of running water. Claire turned back to the sink, rinsing the last dish, her movements slow and calm. The moment wasn't grand or dramatic. It was peaceful, human, whole. She looked out the window, light warming her face, and for the first time, there was no ache in her chest. Just stillness, just freedom. Her voice carried softly over the sound of water. Sometimes healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, and choosing peace anyway. Fade out. The same kitchen, the same woman, but a life quietly reborn.